It was just before sunset when Daniel took Max out for what would unknowingly be their final walk. Max, a golden retriever puppy with soft amber eyes and an endless wagging tail, was barely 6 months old. He tugged happily at the leash, chasing leaves and barking at birds, oblivious to the world's growing darkness. Rumors had spread for weeks, of animals acting strangely, of a virus-jumping species, of attacks in distant cities, but Daniel never paid them much mind. Until that night. A sharp screech came from an alley near the park. Max stopped and growled low. Before Daniel could pull him back, a shadow lunged from the darkness, another dog, twisted and snarling, its eyes milky white. Max barked wildly, pulling free. There was a blur of fur, a yelp, a snap, and then silence. And then, Daniel rushed forward. The creature was gone. Max stood trembling, a shallow cut on his side. "It's okay, boy," Daniel whispered, hugging him tightly. "We'll get you patched up." At the vet, everything seemed normal. The wound was cleaned and Max received a booster shot just in case. Daniel took him home, relieved. But that night, Max didn't eat. He whimpered at the door, pawing at it softly as if something called him outside. By morning, he was gone. Daniel searched for days, through parks, alleys, empty streets, posters, online posts, nothing, just silence. Until the fourth night, Daniel woke to a scratching sound, slow, steady, coming from the front door. He opened it cautiously, and there, sitting perfectly still in the dim light of the porch, was Max. But something was wrong. His eyes were clouded, his tail didn't wag. A faint greenish hue clung to his fur and he made no sound. He just stared. Daniel's heart twisted. "Max?" he whispered, kneeling. The puppy stood, took a slow step forward, then turned around and walked away into the darkness. Daniel didn't sleep after that. Max had returned, but changed. Not fully gone, but not fully there either. He hadn't attacked, hadn't growled, hadn't even barked. But something in Daniel's gut told him what he saw wasn't just grief playing tricks. The next night, it happened again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Same time, same sound, same slow rhythm at the front door. Daniel rose, heart pounding. He peered through the peephole. Max sat on the porch, eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight, body still as a statue. When Daniel opened the door, Max stood, stared at him silently, and walked away again. This repeated for days. Each night the puppy came. Each night he left, always alone, always quiet, always waiting. By the 7th visit, Daniel had stopped denying it. Max wasn't just lost. He was infected, but still coming home. Daniel started researching obsessively. Online forums, underground message boards, bizarre Reddit threads. Most dismissed it as a hoax until he stumbled upon one post. "My cat came back after being bitten. She stared at the window every night for a week. I couldn't take it anymore. I let her in. She didn't attack. She just curled up beside me. Cold, but peaceful, like she was trying to remember who she was." Daniel sat back, breath caught in his throat. Could Max be doing the same? The next night, Daniel left the door cracked slightly. Just enough. When the scratching began, he waited in the shadows. Max entered slowly. His steps were stiff but careful. He walked to his old bed in the corner and curled up. Daniel stood frozen, watching his once playful companion now lying still, unmoving, but present. The air around Max was colder, the smell faintly metallic, but there was no growl, no aggression. Just presence, as if some small piece of him, the real Max, was still fighting to come home. Daniel whispered, "Are you still in there, buddy?" Max raised his head slowly. His eyes locked onto Daniel's, and for a split second, Daniel swore he saw a flicker. A tail twitch, a glimmer of recognition, but in the distance from outside the house came another sound. More scratching, this time but from the back door. Daniel froze. The scratching at the back door was softer than Max's, quicker, almost impatient. It came in uneven bursts. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Pause, then scratch again. Max lifted his head and growled. It wasn't the low, aggressive growl of a predator. It was warning. Fear. He stood slowly, placing himself between Daniel and the back door. Daniel crept toward the kitchen, grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and aimed it through the window above the sink. There were two figures, dogs, or what used to be dogs. Their fur hung in patches and their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, just like Max's. But their movements were wrong, jerky, unnatural, and they weren't waiting like Max had. They were trying to get in. Daniel stepped back, heart hammering. Suddenly, crack! A loud snap as the back door's bottom panel splintered inward. One of the creatures pushed its snout through, snarling, foam dripping from its muzzle. Max barked loud and sharp. It was the first sound he'd made in days. The two dogs stopped. For a moment, the air stilled. Then they turned and slinked away into the night. Daniel slammed the deadbolt shut and leaned against the door, breath shallow. Max walked back to his bed, curled up again, and didn't move. The next morning, Daniel didn't go to work. He started making calls, to vets, to emergency services, to animal control. No one believed him. The only advice he got was to put the animal down. But Max wasn't dangerous, not to him. Daniel cleaned the wounds on Max's side. His skin was cold to the touch, but the puppy didn't resist. When Daniel touched his forehead gently, Max licked his hand, weak, trembling, but real. Something was keeping him tethered. That evening, Daniel reviewed his security footage. What he saw chilled him. Max had been returning to the door every night exactly at 2:13 a.m., and each time he came alone, until the previous night. Then something else hit him. Each night Max came, he left in the same direction, into the woods near the back of the house. Daniel zoomed in on the footage. On the edge of the forest, a figure, human-shaped, motionless, watching. He paused the frame. Whoever, or whatever it wasn't alone. Behind it stood dozens of glowing eyes. Daniel couldn't shake the image. That figure in the woods, the eyes behind it, the way Max barked to protect him even now, even undead. Something bigger was at play. This wasn't just an infection. It was a gathering. That night, Daniel didn't wait inside. He zipped up a jacket, packed a flashlight, a pocket knife, and tucked an old toy of Max's, a squeaky duck, into his bag. If Max had any memory left, it might help anchor him. At 2 a.m., Daniel opened the front door and waited. As expected, Max appeared on the porch, still and silent. But this time, Daniel knelt down beside him. "Take me," he whispered, "wherever you keep going." Max blinked slowly, then turned and began walking, stiff but purposeful, toward the woods. Daniel followed. They weaved through trees and shadows, past rusted fences and forgotten trails. The deeper they went, the colder the air grew. Daniel noticed the silence. No crickets, no wind, no birds. Just Max's soft steps and his own heartbeat. After about 20 minutes, Max stopped. They had arrived. A clearing opened before them, bathed in unnatural green light from a strange glowing stone in the center. Around it stood over a dozen infected animals, dogs, cats, even a raccoon. All silent, all watching. And across from Daniel stood the figure from the footage. A man in tattered robes, eyes sunken and skin pale like ash. But his voice when he spoke was calm. "You shouldn't have followed, Daniel." Daniel stepped forward. "What did you do to them? To him?" The man smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything. I gave them a choice. A second life. One foot in death. One in memory. They return to what they love most. That's why your puppy keeps coming home." Max looked up at Daniel, eyes foggy but filled with something ancient. Sadness, loyalty. The man stepped closer. "But they don't last forever unless they're anchored by memory, by bond, and you, Daniel, are a stronger anchor than most." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your grief is keeping him here, and the longer he stays, the more they will come. You brought him back, and now they all want to come back too." Suddenly, the forest behind Daniel came alive with movement. More eyes, more infected, marching toward the clearing. And all of them were staring at him. Daniel backed away as the infected drew closer, their glowing eyes locked on him. Not hostile, not yet, but curious, hungry for something deeper than flesh. Connection. The man in robes stood still, arms folded. "They don't want to hurt you," he said. "They want what Max has, a tether, a purpose. Max moved between Daniel and the growing crowd, fur bristling despite his decaying body. He snarled low, but not in violence. In protection. Daniel's voice trembled. Why me? Why now? Because you didn't let go, the man answered. You mourned. You hoped. And that hope acts like a beacon. It draws the lost ones. Daniel glanced around. The animals were circling now, forming a wide ring in the clearing. They didn't attack. They just stood, staring. Some limped forward. A one-eyed husky. A cat missing half its tail. A fox with ribs poking through thin fur. All broken, all yearning. Daniel's throat tightened. They remember? Not the way you do, said the robed figure. Not with thoughts, with fragments, a scent, a sound, a person. Max found his way back because his soul remembered you. That's rare. Daniel pulled the squeaky duck from his bag. Max's ears twitched. A low whine escaped his throat. He took a step forward, and another. Suddenly, Max nuzzled the toy and wagged his tail. It was the first time since he'd changed. The surrounding animals leaned in. Some tilted their heads. Others let out soft, ghostly cries. Not of hunger, but longing. The man watched with quiet amusement. You see now, don't you? They're not monsters. They're memories in search of meaning. Daniel's hands tightened around the toy. Then help me fix this. If they're still in there, we can save them. A pause. Then the man's smile faded. Save them? No. Memory fades. And when it does, they turn. Daniel's stomach dropped. Turn into what? They forget why they came. Then they feed. Not for sustenance, but to fill the void of lost memory. Max let out a sudden bark. The animals turned sharply, with some looking behind them. Something was approaching from the deeper woods. Heavy footsteps, snarling breath, a low rumbling growl, the man whispered. But some never had a memory to begin with. And then it stepped into the light. Not a dog. Not a human. Something new. And it was looking straight at Max. The creature was enormous. Almost wolf-like but misshapen. Its back was arched with jagged bone, and long patches of fur dangled like rotting cloth. Its face was wrong. No eyes, just smooth gray flesh where a snout should be, and a mouth that split vertically down its head, lined with rows of twitching, needle-like teeth. The other infected animals whimpered and stepped back, fear radiating from them. Even the robed man's calm demeanor faltered. Max stood frozen, tail stiff, gaze locked on the beast. Daniel whispered, "What is that?" The man replied without looking at him. The ones who weren't loved. The ones no one waited for, no scent to follow, no memory to return to. Hollow. The hollow one stepped forward, sniffing the air through invisible nostrils. Its head turned toward Max, and it growled. Max growled back, a sound deeper than Daniel had ever heard from him. Then the beast lunged. Max launched himself forward without hesitation, slamming into the hollow one mid-air. The two crashed into the ground, rolling and tearing at each other. The animals scattered. Daniel yelled out, instinctively running forward, but the robed man held him back. "Don't interfere, Max is defending you. This is the price of being remembered." Daniel watched, helpless, as Max fought savagely. He was smaller, weaker, but relentless. He bit the hollow one's neck, dodged its claws, and pushed it toward the edge of the clearing. But the hollow one didn't bleed, it didn't feel pain. It was emptiness, made flesh. The tide shifted quickly. The beast slammed Max into a tree. There was a crack. Bone or bark, Daniel couldn't tell. Max yelped and fell motionless. "No!" Daniel broke free from the man and ran to Max's side. Blood, or something like it, oozed from the puppy's side. His cloudy eyes blinked slowly and he struggled to lift his head. The hollow one turned its attention to Daniel now. It took a single step forward. Then another. Daniel stood trembling. "You want me? Come on then." The creature paused, sniffed the air again. It smelled something. Daniel pulled the duck toy from his pocket, Max's favorite. The hollow one twitched. Then Daniel did something he hadn't done in years. He squeezed it. Squeak. Max's head shot up. In a flash, the puppy leapt forward, jaws wide, and sank his teeth deep into the hollow one's neck. The beast shrieked, a sound that cracked through the forest like thunder. It stumbled back, disoriented, and vanished into the trees. Max collapsed. Daniel caught him. The other infected crept slowly back into the clearing, quieter now, mournful, and Max, battered and broken, nuzzled into Daniel's chest with one last breath. The man in robes approached, eyes full of something almost human. "The bond is stronger than I thought." Daniel looked down, tears falling. But Max's chest rose once, twice, then stilled. Max's body lay limp in Daniel's arms, still cold, silent. The fog in his eyes had cleared, just barely, as if in that last moment he had truly come back. But now, nothing. Daniel didn't speak. He couldn't. His fingers gently stroked Max's fur and the puppy's head lolled to the side. The squeaky duck dropped from Daniel's hand and landed beside them with a faint chirp. The sound echoed through the trees like a farewell. Around them, the infected animals stood motionless. Some sat, others lay down, all watching. A quiet grief filled the clearing, deep, ancient, collective, a kind of mourning only the forgotten could understand. The man in robes knelt beside Daniel. "He saved you. That's more than most of them ever got." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Can he come back again?" The man shook his head slowly. "He came back as far as he could, but he used the last of that tether to protect you." Daniel looked up, eyes red. "Then why are they still here?" The man didn't answer at first. He looked at the glowing stone in the center of the clearing. "They don't know how to leave," he said softly. "They're trapped between memory and void. Some don't even remember what they're looking for anymore." Daniel stood, still holding Max's body. "So help them, let them go." The man turned to face him, expression darkening. "You think I have that power? You brought them back." "No." His voice was like a whisper through dry leaves. "You did. Every one of them found their way here because of someone like you. Someone who couldn't let go. Someone who whispered their names in sleep and prayed for one more day." Daniel looked around. Each infected was staring at him, not with hunger, but with hope. He took a shaky breath. "So what do I do?" The man pointed to the stone. "Memory is energy, life, death, regret. If you give it what binds you most, it may release what no longer serves." Daniel stepped forward. The stone pulsed faintly. Inside it, he thought he saw images. Max as a puppy jumping in leaves. Max curled up by the fire. Max's last bark. Tears streamed down his face. He bent down and placed Max's body gently at the base of the stone. Then with trembling hands, he took the squeaky duck and laid it on top. The stone flared. A warm wind swept through the clearing. The infected animals let out soft cries, and one by one they began to fade, dissolving into flecks of light like ash carried away on a gentle breeze. Max's body was the last to go. As he vanished, Daniel felt it, a sudden deep peace. Then, nothing. Silence. The forest was empty again. The man in robes stood alone, except he was no longer robed. He looked young, whole, human. He smiled gently. "Thank you, Daniel." Then he too faded into the wind. Daniel was left standing alone under the stars. And for the first time in weeks, the night felt quiet. But as he turned to leave, he heard something behind him. A soft scratch met the edge of the trees. Daniel froze. That sound, the gentle scratch at bark, barely audible beneath the sighing of the wind, echoed like thunder in his chest. He turned slowly. At the edge of the trees, between shadow and moonlight, something moved. But it wasn't Max. It was smaller, shivering, a puppy, but not his. Its fur was patchy, tail tucked between its legs. One ear drooped. Its eyes were wide with fear, not infection. No glow, no gray skin, just a lost, breathing animal, alone in the dark. Daniel crouched, hands open. "Hey, it's okay," he whispered. The pup didn't move. Then behind it, a growl, low and guttural. Something unseen stepped forward. The hollow one was back, but it looked different now. Its body was larger, twitching with unnatural energy. The vertical mouth opened, revealing a glistening second row of teeth. This time, it didn't hesitate. It lunged. Daniel sprang forward, scooping the pup into his arms and running blindly through the forest. Branches lashed his face. Roots clawed at his feet. The growl behind him grew louder, closer. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The woods parted, revealing the edge of his backyard. He stumbled through the tall grass, heart racing, shoes soaked with mud and blood. He crashed through the back door just as the Hollow One slammed into it with monstrous force. The house shook. Daniel clutched the new puppy, chest heaving. It whimpered against him, curling into a trembling ball, then silence. The creature didn't follow. Not immediately. Daniel bolted the door and backed away. He collapsed onto the couch, eyes locked on the shaking door, waiting for another hit. But none came. Just quiet.
And the pup.
He looked down. It had fallen asleep in his lap, tiny body warm, alive. Daniel blinked away tears. Then he noticed something strange. Around the pup's neck was a torn collar, faded writing barely legible in the dim light. He held it up, breath catching. Milo. Daniel hadn't spoken that name in years. Milo had been Max's brother, stillborn, buried beneath the old oak in the woods when he was just a day old. But this wasn't a memory. This was real. Or something close to it. The door scratched again. Softly. Rhythmically. Daniel stood. Because this time it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the basement. The scratching continued. Slow, deliberate, echoing from beneath the floorboards. Daniel stared at the basement door. It hadn't been opened in years. Not since his father's things were stored down there. It was just old paint cans, broken furniture, cobwebs, and the faint, musty scent of forgotten time. Or so he thought. The new puppy, Milo, stirred slightly in his arms but didn't wake. Daniel set him gently in a blanket on the couch, grabbed a flashlight, and walked toward the basement door. His hand hesitated on the knob. The scratching stopped. A breathless moment passed. Then 3 knocks. Not scratching, not claws. Knocks. Daniel's heart stuttered. He turned the knob slowly and opened the door. A wave of cold air swept over him. The stairs below seemed darker than they should. Too dark. As if the light from the house refused to follow. He flicked on the flashlight and descended one careful step at a time. The wood creaked. The air grew colder. At the bottom, Daniel shone his light across the room. Dust motes danced in the beam. Boxes sat untouched, and cobwebs hung from rusted shelves. Nothing moved. Until he saw it. The door. A small wooden one tucked into the foundation wall. A door that had never been there before. Child-sized, old, and slightly open, his mouth went dry. He stepped forward and pushed it wider. A tunnel stretched beyond it, impossibly long, carved in raw dirt and stone. And at the far end, light. A flickering green glow, just like the stone in the clearing. Daniel crawled through. The tunnel narrowed, walls pressing close. His breath echoed in the tight space. Then, after a few painful minutes, it opened into a round chamber. In the center, a second glowing stone, but this one pulsed faster like a heartbeat, and around it, suspended in the air like fragile ghosts, were memories. Not his, but others. A child's bike tipped over in a yard, a leash without a collar, a shattered picture frame. Daniel turned slowly, realizing he wasn't alone. Figures stood along the edges of the room, not alive, not fully dead. Echoes of people, their faces flickering with sorrow. He recognized one. His father, standing in the shadows, watching. "Dad?" The figure tilted its head, and then it spoke in his father's voice, warped and distant. "It always starts with love, and it always ends with a door." The chamber trembled. Behind Daniel, something crawled into the tunnel, snarling, breathing. The Hollow One. But it wasn't after Daniel this time. It was after the stone. The chamber shook violently as the Hollow One advanced on the glowing stone at the center. Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. The ghostly figures flickered, their faces etched with fear and sorrow. His father's apparition stepped forward, voice steady but urgent. "That stone holds the memories of those lost, the ties that bind them to this world. If it breaks, the memories will be devoured, and the Hollow One will grow stronger." Daniel's mind raced. "How do I stop it?" "Use the tether of love," the apparition replied. "The bond that refuses to break." Daniel glanced down at Milo, who whimpered softly on the couch above. He realized then the puppy was the key. Max's brother, a second chance. He sprinted back through the tunnel, dodging falling stones and twisting roots. The Hollow One snarled behind him, but it hesitated near the chamber's mouth. Daniel burst into the living room, clutching Milo close. He whispered, This is your home now. You belong here." Suddenly, Milo's eyes shimmered, glowing faintly like Max's head. He let out a soft bark, and a wave of warmth spread through the room. The air brightened. Outside, the infected animals began to stir, their shadows retreating. Daniel understood. Milo carried the last tether and now a chance to heal what was broken. But as relief washed over him, the basement door slammed shut on its own, and the scratching started again. The basement door jolted on its hinges. Daniel backed away, holding Milo close. The pup trembled, but his eyes remained locked on the door, glowing faintly like embers ready to spark into flame. Then came the voice. Not a growl, not a howl, but a voice, low, broken, familiar. "Let me in." Daniel's blood ran cold. It was Max, or what was left of him, but it couldn't be. Max was gone. His body vanished with the others, didn't it? He approached the door slowly, pressing his ear to it. The voice came again, a rasp carried on breath that shouldn't exist. "You left me there, Daniel. You gave Milo the tether, but I never asked to go." Daniel staggered back. Milo barked sharply, not out of fear but in warning. The door rattled again. The walls began to pulse, the same green as the memory stone. Daniel realized the Hollow One had done something, twisted the tether, anchored something inside it. Max, or what wore Max's voice, was being pulled back. But it wasn't just about Max anymore. Daniel opened a drawer, pulling out a worn leather leash. Max's, untouched since the day he died. He gripped it tight, stepping toward the door. If there was even the smallest chance, he turned the knob. The staircase below wasn't there anymore, just a drop into void. Daniel took a breath and jumped. He landed hard, rolling through the same underground chamber. But it had changed. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, the glowing stone now cracked and flickering. And in the center, bound in thick black vines, was Max, eyes dim, chest barely moving. "Daniel?" he whimpered. The Hollow One emerged from behind the stone, larger than ever, bloated with absorbed memory, faces flickering across its skin like screaming echoes. It reared back. Daniel ran to Max, slapping the leash around his neck. "I never gave up on you," he said, voice breaking. "You're still mine." The stone pulsed. Max's eyes opened fully, not gray, not glazed, but alive and furious. With a growl, Max leapt, leash still wrapped around him, and slammed into the Hollow One. The chamber exploded with light. Light burst like a nova through the chamber. Dirt and shadows exploded outward as Max collided with the Hollow One, sending it crashing into the stone wall. The beast screeched, not just in pain, but in fear. The memory stone, now split down the center, pulsed erratically. From the cracks, silvery tendrils of memory began to leak. Images, moments, emotions, swirling like fog around Daniel. He saw himself as a boy cradling Max for the first time. The day Max got lost in the storm and Daniel searched for hours. The last time they played fetch, before the infection, but it didn't stop there. He saw other memories, not his. Children crying over missing pets. A woman calling for her dog at dusk. A boy digging a tiny grave under an oak tree. These were the echoes of others. Lives and bonds, all trapped by grief, by refusal to let go. The Hollow One shrieked, lashing out. It struck Max with a clawed limb, sending the pup skidding across the chamber floor. "No!" Daniel ran to him, scooping him up. Max coughed, weak but alive. The Hollow One advanced, its many mouths whispering, "He was mine, they all are. You can't take back what's already fading." But something had changed. The ghostly figures around the chamber began to step forward, drawn by the crackling tether of love between Daniel and Max. Dozens, then hundreds, each a former owner, each a silent witness. Their faces grew brighter, their shadows thinner. Daniel stood slowly, Max still in his arms, and faced the Hollow One. "You feed on what we lose," he said, voice steady. "But you fear what we remember." He took Max's leash and tied it around his wrist. The memory stone shattered completely. A shockwave of light and sound blasted through the tunnel. The Hollow One staggered back and now shrinking, its many mouths gasping silently. The faces on its body turned to ash. And for the first time, Daniel saw what it really was. Not a monster, not a demon, but a void. The space left behind when love becomes sorrow and sorrow turns to forgetting. Daniel stepped forward, leash taut, Max now standing at his side. "You don't get him," he whispered. Then with a single final growl, Max lunged. The hollow one let out a howl so deep it split the very air, and then it vanished. Gone. The chamber walls stilled. The memories calmed. Max stood beside Daniel, tired but alive. And the door behind them, the one that had never been there before, creaked open again. Back to the house. Back to the light. Daniel stepped through the strange, creaking door with Max trotting quietly at his side. No longer gray, no longer rotting or broken, but alive. His fur was matted, his steps still uneven, but his eyes, clear, bright, awake. The tunnel behind them vanished. Just like that, gone. And they were back in the basement of Daniel's house. Everything was quiet. Milo barked from upstairs, sensing them. Daniel smiled faintly and scooped Max into his arms, carrying him up the stairs into the soft light of early morning. The sky outside was no longer bruised purple or shadowed by fog. It was clear, a fresh sunrise cracking over the horizon. Max blinked slowly at the sunlight. He licked Daniel's chin. "I missed you too," Daniel whispered. But something felt off. Milo circled them, tail wagging, but he was trembling. He sniffed Max, then yelped and backed away. Not in fear, in recognition. Max looked at the pup, ears tilting. A soft whimper left his throat. A sound Daniel had never heard from him before. A sound not of dominance or warning, but of remorse. Milo lowered his head, and suddenly Daniel understood. Milo hadn't been sent to replace Max. He had been sent to remind him who he once was. The two dogs stood nose to nose. Then, a small wagging tail from Max. A forgiveness offered, and accepted. Daniel sat back, letting the warmth of it wash over him. But then, the doorbell rang. He tensed. Nobody had visited since the infection began. Nobody even came near his neighborhood anymore. He opened the door slowly. A man stood there, middle-aged, wearing a faded veterinary coat. His eyes were tired but kind. "Daniel Mitchell?" the man asked. Daniel nodded. The vet gave a hesitant smile. "You're not going to believe this, but someone left this at my clinic. Said you'd know what to do with it." He reached into a carrier and pulled out a third puppy, but this one wasn't alive. Its eyes were open, empty, skin pale. It was infected. Daniel's blood turned to ice. "I don't understand." The vet sighed. "Neither did I, but when I scanned him, he had a chip." He handed Daniel a printout, and there in faded letters, name Barkley. Owner Daniel Mitchell, registered 2004, deceased. Daniel stumbled back. That dog had died before Max. He looked at the puppy again. Its gaze locked onto his, gray hollow but waiting. Just like Max had waited, just like all the others. Daniel felt a pull deep in his chest. Something bigger was at work. This wasn't just about his dogs. It never had been. Daniel stared at the tiny infected puppy in the vet's arms. Its body didn't twitch or growl, it simply watched. Silent. Still. A presence. Not a threat. Barkley. A name Daniel hadn't heard in over a decade. The first dog he ever loved, and the first he lost. He remembered burying him in the backyard as a boy, sobbing into his father's coat. He hadn't thought of Barkley in years. Not once. That hit harder than any monster, because that's when it clicked. The hollow one hadn't been feeding on death. It fed on forgetting, not grief but neglect, not pain but silence. The infected weren't just undead, they were echoes. Echoes of animals left behind in memory, cast into the dark places where no one visits anymore. Daniel looked to Max and Milo. Both stared at Barkley unmoving, but not out of fear, out of recognition. Max padded slowly forward and sniffed the tiny pup's nose. A low whine escaped his throat. Milo followed, laying beside Barkley, nuzzling gently. Daniel reached into the carrier and lifted the puppy out. Its body was cold but not decaying, preserved in some impossible way, like a photo frozen in time. And then for the second time, Max growled. Not at Barkley. At something behind them. Daniel turned. Outside, beyond the yard, dozens of infected animals had gathered. Dogs, cats, even birds. They didn't attack. They simply stood, eyes glowing faintly, heads tilted, staring at the house. Waiting. A strange hum filled the air. Low, rhythmic, like breathing. Daniel backed toward the door, clutching Barkley, heart racing. And then, one by one, the infected sat, formed rows, and looked expectant. as if waiting for something only Daniel could give. Inside the house, Max barked once, loud and clear. The others outside responded in perfect unison, a chorus of howls and cries that shook Daniel to his core. He held Barkley closer and felt something, warmth, faint, but real. The infection was still there, but Barkley was trying to come back, just like Max had. Daniel turned to the vet. How many others? The man looked haunted. Too many. Dogs, cats, abandoned, lost, forgotten. Daniel looked out at the waiting crowd. Max stood beside him, tail high. It was time. Time to find the rest, to remember, and maybe, just maybe, bring them home. Daniel stood at the edge of his porch. Barkley nestled in his arms, Max and Milo flanking him like loyal sentries. Beyond the fence, the infected still sat in eerie silence. Not advancing, not snarling, just watching, waiting. They were everywhere now, in the trees, on rooftops, in the shadowed places between parked cars. Their presence should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. It felt like a vigil, as though they were waiting for someone to say the words no one had ever spoken. Daniel stepped down to the yard. The cold morning dew soaked his socks, but he barely felt it. I remember you, he said softly, and the moment those words left his lips, something shifted. The nearest infected, a golden retriever with half-torn ears, blinked. Blinking, not the glassy stare of the dead, but something else. Something alive. Daniel turned to Max. They're not trying to attack, they're trying to be seen. Milo barked in agreement, circling Barkley with anxious energy. Suddenly, the air shimmered. A faint trail of light, like footsteps from an invisible traveler, appeared in the grass, leading away from Daniel's yard and into the woods. A path. The same glow as the memory stone. The same pulse that had shattered the hollow one. Max sniffed it and took a step forward. Daniel followed, eyes scanning the crowd. One by one, the infected animals rose and followed. The vet stood at the porch, stunned. Where are you going? Daniel didn't stop walking. To remember them, all of them. They passed the clearing where the stone once lay, now a crater of light with roots glowing faintly. The memory path led them deeper into places Daniel didn't even know existed. Abandoned parks, forgotten trails, collapsed bridges covered in ivy, and everywhere they went, the infected followed, not like a horde, like a procession, each one beginning to blink, to stir, to return. And the memories began to return to Daniel as well. Names, faces, stories he'd forgotten. The dog his aunt lost in a fire. The stray cat he used to feed after school. A bird his sister cried over for weeks after its cage fell. They were all here, because no one else had remembered them. They weren't monsters. They were the unspoken goodbyes of the world. And he was beginning to see the truth. The infection was never a disease. It was a grief with no name. And he was the only one walking the path back to it. The memory path curved deeper into the earth, leading Daniel through an old stone archway, covered in moss and rusted ivy. The air was colder now, not from fear but from stillness. A sacred hush. Max walked beside him, head low but alert. Milo kept close, ears twitching at every sound. Barkley, though limp in Daniel's arms, began to emit a faint warmth like an ember under ash. And then, they entered the clearing. A wide, hollow basin of earth lay ahead, overgrown with vines and dotted with stones. Not natural ones. Headstones, small, crude. Some made from sticks or flat rocks, others just patches of disturbed soil, unmarked graves. The resting places of pets who'd never been properly remembered. Daniel's throat tightened. He was standing in a cemetery of the unburied, not by body but by memory. And every infected creature behind him had come to find theirs. The wind picked up, and the earth began to glow. From each grave, soft lights began to rise, not ghosts, not spirits, but memories. One showed a girl brushing her cat in the sunlight. Another, a boy sneaking food to his dog under the dinner table. A child in pajamas chasing a rabbit around the living room. Dozens of them, hundreds. Daniel stood in awe as the infected animals began stepping forward, one by one, toward their glowing memories. And then something miraculous happened. Each time they touched that glowing memory, they changed. The gray drained from their eyes. Their fur brightened, their limbs straightened. And they lay down, not like predators, like they were finally home. Barkley stirred. He wiggled weakly, and Daniel gently lowered him to the ground. The puppy sniffed forward, finding a small mound beneath a tree. He paused in and wagged his tiny tail. A soft chime rang out, and the infection fell from his body like dust. Daniel wept openly. For all the animals he'd forgotten, for all the ones he never even knew. But then something cracked behind him. He turned quickly. One animal hadn't followed the others. It stood tall, proud, still infected. Its fur was burned, its jaw hung crooked, and around its neck, a collar with Daniel's name. But he didn't recognize it. Not at first. Until he remembered a scream in the night. A storm. A backyard gate he forgot to lock. The dog had never returned. And he'd never told anyone. He'd buried the guilt. Now it had come back, not as memory, but as something worse. Regret made flesh. And it wasn't here for peace. The dog stepped forward, dragging one paw as it limped from the shadow of the trees. The collar was rusted, but Daniel could still make out the tag beneath the filth. Shadow. The name hit him like a hammer to the chest. He remembered now. Not a fuzzy childhood memory, not a warm goodbye. But a stormy night, a flash of lightning, a bark cut short. He had let Shadow out and forgotten. The next morning, the gate was open. The dog was gone. And he never looked for him. He was a teenager, busy, selfish. He told himself Shadow must have run away. That dogs forget too, that maybe someone else took him in. But deep down, Daniel knew the truth. He had abandoned him. And Shadow had never come back. Until now. The infected dog's eyes burned brighter than the others. Not hollow, angry. His body didn't flicker with memory light. He wasn't searching for peace. He was here for reckoning. Max growled, stepping in front of Daniel. But Shadow let out a low snarl that silenced the world. The other animals parted. Even the trees seemed to shrink back. Daniel took a slow step forward. "Shadow," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." "No change. You waited at the gate, didn't you, every night, just like Max did?" Still no change. Daniel dropped to his knees. "I didn't deserve your loyalty or your love, but you gave it anyway, and I forgot you." The wind died. Shadow took a step closer. Daniel closed his eyes, chest heaving. "I failed you." Silence. "I still remember your favorite toy. That squeaky frog you'd never let go. I remember the way you barked when the doorbell rang. I remember you, Shadow, and I never should have let you go. Without goodbye." Something shifted. The wind picked up again, but it was warmer now. Not biting, but embracing. Shadow's eyes flickered. His tail twitched. A glow, dim at first, began to pulse from the ground below him. A grave appeared where none had been before. Daniel watched in disbelief. Shadow stepped onto it, and the infection began to peel away. His fur darkened back to its rich black sheen. His jaw straightened. His legs grew strong again. And then, for the first time in years, Shadow barked. Once. Clear. Forgiven. Daniel reached out, and Shadow licked his hand. He wept again. Max padded forward and nudged Shadow's side. Milo joined. Barkley yipped. The four of them, the lost, the found, the forgiven, stood together. And then Daniel heard it. From deep within the trees, a voice familiar. Calling his name, the voice came again, stronger. Daniel had come back. He took a step forward into the dense woods beyond the memory clearing. The light from the graves began to fade behind him, replaced by flickering shadows and whispers that curled like mist around the bark of the trees. "Hello?" he called. No answer. Then, "You were never meant to come this far." The voice didn't belong to anyone he knew. It was inside him, layered with echoes of grief, guilt, love, and memory. Daniel pressed forward. The trees grew thicker, the air colder, every breath felt like pulling glass. The dogs followed, silent but alert. Finally, the woods opened into a clearing darker than any before. Not because of shadows, but because of absence. The ground here was dead. No grass, no graves, no light. Only a mirror stood in the center. Old, cracked, tall enough to reflect all of them. Daniel stepped closer. His reflection stared back, but something was wrong. In the mirror, he was alone. No Max, no Milo, no Barkley, no Shadow. Just him. And behind him in the mirror world, the hollow one. But it wasn't monstrous anymore. It looked exactly like Daniel. Pale, sunken, empty. It spoke. You remembered them, but not yourself. Daniel's reflection stepped forward, hands out. You buried more than dogs. You buried who you were. The boy who loved. The boy who believed. You forgot why you mattered to them. Daniel shook his head. I never meant to forget. But you did, the reflection snapped. You grieved them, yes, but you never forgave yourself. The mirror began to crack again, a spiderweb of fractures growing with each heartbeat. Behind him, the dogs whined. Daniel turned. They were flickering. Max faded for a moment, then Barkley, then Shadow. No, he was losing them again, because the final tether wasn't love or memory, it was forgiveness, and Daniel hadn't given it to himself. He turned back to the mirror. I was just a kid, he whispered. I was scared, I didn't know how to handle loss, but that doesn't mean I didn't love them. He stepped forward, hand on the glass. I remember them now, I carry them, but I won't keep punishing myself. That's not what they would have wanted. He looked back at the dogs. They watched silently, waiting. I forgive myself. The mirror shattered. Light erupted from the cracks, engulfing the clearing. The darkness vanished, and standing before Daniel was Max, whole, radiant, alive. One by one, the others stepped into the light too, their forms no longer fading but glowing. With quiet strength, Daniel had remembered them, and finally he had remembered himself. The light faded gently like dawn rising over a dark forest. Daniel stood in the now silent clearing, surrounded by Max, Milo, Barkley, and Shadow. No longer twisted by infection, they looked as they had in life, vibrant, loyal, alive. Behind them, the procession of once infected animals waited at the tree line. And slowly, one by one, they too began to step into the clearing, their bodies shedding the last remnants of the darkness. But this wasn't just a return. It was a homecoming. Each animal seemed to know exactly where to go. Some turned and vanished into trails of light, crossing back into the memories of the ones who had loved them. Others simply lay down and faded, finally at peace. Daniel walked slowly with Max by his side, heading back toward the town. But the world had changed, or perhaps it had simply remembered. As he crossed into the edge of the neighborhood, people stood outside their homes, silent, stunned, watching the animals emerge from the woods. No one screamed. No one ran. Instead, cries of recognition broke out. Charlie? Luna! Oh my God, Luna! Is that Bobo? The animals returned to their people. Not all. Some had no one left. But those that did found them again. It was as if the fog that had clouded the world for so long, the collective grief, the unspoken guilt, had been lifted. The infection hadn't been a disease of flesh. It was a disease of forgetting. And now it was being cured. Daniel reached his home just as the sun crested the horizon. Max bounded up the steps and sat by the door, just like he had every day, even when he was lost. Milo curled beside him, tail wagging lazily. Shadow hesitated. Daniel knelt and held out his arms. You don't have to wait anymore, you're home. Shadow padded forward, nuzzled Daniel's chest, and let out a long, content sigh before curling. Up on the porch, Barkley yipped once, then pressed his tiny head into Daniel's palm. Daniel laughed through his tears. Inside, the house felt warmer. Lived in. Alive. The vet, who had followed from a distance, arrived quietly. What happened out there? Daniel looked out at the horizon. I think we remembered what love really means, he said softly. Not just feeling it, but carrying it always. The vet nodded. And the ones still waiting? Daniel smiled. We'll find them one by one until no one's left behind. That night, Daniel left the porch light on. Not for himself, but for any animal still walking the dark, because now they knew someone was waiting too. The town changed in quiet, beautiful ways. In the days after the homecoming, people began building small memorial gardens in their yards, places not just to mourn but to remember. Children painted stones with paw prints and names. Adults planted trees for the animals they once loved but never said goodbye to. The infection, as the world had called it, was gone. Not because it had been cured, but because it had been understood. It was never a virus. It was memory untended, love left in silence. And now it was no longer forgotten. Daniel's porch became a sort of beacon. Every evening, animals on lost wandering, confused, and would approach the gate, and Max would bark once softly to let Daniel know. He'd open the door. He always did. Because some of them were just looking for a place to rest, and others still had someone to find. Shadow remained closest, almost like a guardian. Milo ran errands with local kids and became a neighborhood favorite. Barkley finally learned how to catch a ball, and to everyone's surprise, was was quite good at it. And Max never left Daniel's side again. One night, as Daniel sat on the porch beneath the stars, Max rested his head on Daniel's knee. "You stayed," Daniel whispered. Max thumped his tail. "You always stayed." A soft wind passed through the trees, carrying with it not a howl but a harmony. A warm sound like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. It wasn't over. Others were still out there, forgotten, waiting. But they would come. Because someone had shown them the way back. And more importantly, someone would be there when they did. Because the door was never locked. Because love, when true, does not end with goodbye. And even a zombie puppy can still find his way home.